everybody. I'm Nicole.
I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Sarah, and together we're the co-founders of Whale Tales, a living library of cetacean stories.
Surprise! We are here for a very, very exciting, extra special, extra long episode for the second ever World Krill Day.
With some extra special guests.
So sit back and enjoy as we dive right in.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Happy International Krill Day. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about krill?
I don't know.
Well, Lindsay, you know the story.
I do know the story. Well, krill are important, and you are about to find out why in this super extra episode. We were asked to create this special episode from Barbara at Pew Charitable Trust, and now we're here. We're going to talk to a couple of researchers and scientists about krill.
We have a lineup of truly amazing guests who are going to tell you, our listeners, all about krill and why you, somebody listening to a podcast who loves whales, should keep listening and care about these itty bitty tiny little krills.
First up, we have Dr. Kim Bernard, who talked to us from Antarctica, which was amazing. Kim is a South African biological oceanographer, and she's an associate professor at Oregon State University. She was the founder of the Zooplankton Ecology Lab at that school's College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Science. And she is currently in Antarctica during the winter studying krill and how they reproduce and survive through the winters.
Thank you so much, Kim, for making this time.
You're welcome. I'm excited to chat with you all today.
Just to start with, tell us about yourself and the work that you're doing.
Sure. So, all right. Well, I'm a biological oceanographer, and I'm an associate professor in the College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences at Oregon State University. And I've been studying Antarctic krill for, I'd say, going on 14 years now. And I've been doing Antarctic research really over 20 years now. And so as a biological oceanographer, my research is really focused on zooplankton. So I could be called a zooplankton ecologist as well. And you're obviously talking to me today about Antarctic krill, but I work on other euphousal species too and other zooplankton. But I think my favorite is definitely Antarctic krill.
You're, as we said, in Antarctica right now. What's that like? Just like a brief overview. I'm sure we've got lots of people who have never even considered going to Antarctica listening to the podcast.
Well, I'm in Antarctica and it's the middle of winter here. So
yeah,
it's
the biggest thing.
Yes, and it is snowing outside right now. I'm looking out my window and there are big fluffy snowflakes falling. It's a magical place, and it's somewhere that is very close to my heart, and if I could, I would keep coming here for the rest of my life. It's hard to describe in so many ways. It's sort of otherworldly, but it is, it's a special place. And being here in the winter is a really unique experience. Prior to this, I've spent 5 summer seasons here at Palmer Station, and this is my 3rd winter. And I think my favorite time of year here is the winter by far, even though we do see more whales in the summertime, and I have some cool whale experiences and encounters from then. But the winter is just, it's a pretty beautiful time of year. It's sort of this eternal sunset, sunrise, pastel colors. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Wow. Sounds beautiful.
Amazing.
Oh, amazing. Can you tell us more about krill that you're studying? And in particular, a question that we've been meaning to ask is, how do they reproduce? There's so much we don't know about krill. Tell us everything.
Well, so let's see. Tell us about krill. Sorry, I'm...
No, well,
I know, it's a big question.
It's more of...
Yes, we'll start that. Tell us about krill, and also
how do they reproduce?
Because that's something we're just like curious about.
Okay, well, krill are part of the group known as euphausids. They are often referred to as shrimp-like crustaceans, but they aren't shrimps. They're not decapods, so they're in their own class. The Antarctic krill, which is the species that I study, its scientific name is Euphausia superba. It can grow up to roughly 2.5 inches in length, so the size of my baby finger, or your baby finger, depending on how big your baby finger is, I suppose. And they can live for up to 7 years, which is really quite astonishing for something so small and an invertebrate like that, for a crustacean. Yeah, and then they only become reproductively active after the age of about 2. So this brings us to the reproduction question. Antarctic krill and other krill reproduce sexually, so they are male and females of the species, and the males have these little sperm packets that they essentially pass over to the females, and then as the females release their thousands of eggs, they pass by the sperm and become fertilized that way. And then for a really long time, I guess it's sort of the common paradigm at the moment is in our understanding of Antarctic krill is that they will release their eggs over deep waters off the shelf. And the reason for this is that it takes about 5 days for these eggs to hatch because of the cold temperatures. So the embryonic development is really quite slow in Antarctica. And the whole time they're sinking through the water column. And so the idea is that they do this over deep waters, sort of 800 to 1,000 meters deep, because in 5 days of sinking, you don't want them to hit, well, presumably they don't want to have their eggs hit the seafloor.
Right.
And so after 5 days, they hatch. And then these tiny little larval stages of the krill have to swim up through the whole entire water column until they get up to the surface. And then they can start feeding on phytoplankton up there. And in Antarctic krill, so I said that they start reproducing at age 2, they only recruit to the population as post-larvae after 1 year. So probably the biggest obstacle in their life cycle is at the larval stage when they have to survive their first winter. And so they're coming into the winter, they haven't had enough time to really feed. The larvae don't accumulate lipids, so they don't have any fat stores to use during the winter. And so they really must feed in the winter in order to survive. And if they're able to do that, then they recruit as juveniles the following spring and summer.
Wow.
That was a lot more
So interesting.
to ask for.
No, that was great. I
fascinating.
just want to learn more about these animals. Yeah, they're so fascinating. So how did you end up studying in Antarctica, krill or otherwise?
So I guess when I was 13, my dad came home from work one day, and he's a zoologist, and one of his colleagues had just come back from the ice, is how he referred to it. But the guy had just spent 2 months down in the Southern Ocean, right off the coast of Antarctica, studying zooplankton and probably also Antarctic krill. He was a zooplankton ecologist. And I remember at that age just thinking that sounded so cool. And I decided then and there that I was going to study, I didn't really know much about zooplankton, but I wanted to be a marine biologist in Antarctica. And then jump forward many years. I actually ended up doing my graduate studies with that same person. So I got my master's and PhD studying with him. And that was in South Africa. That's where I'm from. And then after my PhD, I did a postdoc in the US. That's how I ended up on this side with Dr. Debbie Steinberg at the Virginia Institute of Marine Science. And she was she still is part of the PAMA Antarctica Long-Term Ecological Research Project, or the PAMA LTER. And through that project, I got to come to the Antarctic Peninsula and started studying Antarctic krill and other large zooplankton, so salps and pteropods. But I was just really enamored by krill. They're so cool. They're big enough to see really easily. You don't need a microscope to see what they are. And they have these cool big eyes that sort of stare up at you. And so that's
amazing.
That's how I got into the field of Antarctic research and specifically studying Antarctic krill.
Amazing.
Oh, that's cool.
So what do you think people really should know about krill, or to understand why they're so important, like why we should care, even though most of us don't live in Antarctica?
Yeah, that's a great question. Antarctic krill are by far, I would say, and I don't think I am a little bit biased, but I think this is a very truthful fact. They are critical to the ecosystem in Antarctica. So down here, well, for one, their biomass is estimated at about 500 million metric tons. They are incredibly abundant and very successful. And so many of the high trophic levels down here feed on them, and many of them feed exclusively on Antarctic krill. So I know I'm speaking to a group of people who love whales, humpbacks, blue whales, minke.
Yeah.
They all feed on Antarctic krill. There are also numerous penguins who feed on Antarctic krill, seals, seabirds, fish, squid, you name it. There are so many species of high trophic organisms that feed on Antarctic krill. And many of the other species that don't feed on Antarctic krill directly will feed on something that does. So orcas obviously don't feed on Antarctic krill, but they feed on seals that feed on Antarctic krill. So they really are critical in this ecosystem. And then in addition to the role that they play in the food web, Antarctic krill are essentially, I guess, they're like geoengineers. They're very good at capturing carbon and transferring it down to the deep sea. So in that way, they play an important role in the global carbon cycle.
That's so crazy. They're just so tiny and they do so much.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's the thing. They're small, but in their numbers.
Yeah, it's true. There's a lot of them.
Not small at
They
all.
could take us if they decided to rise up.
They could.
Well, hopefully that's not happening at the moment. But what is happening with krill in the Southern Ocean?
So there are quite a few things happening to krill at the moment in the Southern Ocean. I think first I need to give you an idea of where most of the krill are. So the majority of the circumantarctic krill population is centered around the Antarctic Peninsula and then up into the Scotia Sea. So that's where most of the krill in the Southern Ocean, or the Antarctic krill, can be found. And that is also the area that is warming the most rapidly around Antarctica. So certain parts of Antarctica are cooling, and so there's a sort of confusion as to whether Antarctica has been affected by climate change, at least in the sort of public perception, as far as I understand. But along the Antarctic Peninsula and in the Scotia Sea, there is no doubt that it is warming and sea ice is declining, and that is having a huge impact, negative impact on Antarctic krill in that area. That area is also the focus of the Antarctic krill fishery, which is a rapidly growing fishery and involves numerous, fishing companies from numerous nations, and it's set to expand. Mm-hmm. So krill are not only facing climate change, but they're also facing increasing fishing pressure.
Yeah. So what does your research focus on, and why is that data so important to krill and their current status?
Well, at the moment, I guess the research that I'm doing in Antarctica right now is part of a 5-year grant that I was funded back in 2018. So this is the last field season we have. We're looking at how diet affects the ability of juvenile Antarctic krill to survive the winter, and essentially how it affects their health and their physiology. And there's a couple of reasons why, specifically juvenile, specifically winter, and specifically diet. So we're focusing specifically on juveniles because that stage has been largely understudied in the past. A lot of research has been done on adult krill and on larval krill, but really not much on the juveniles. Winter in particular is also a majorly understudied time of year. It's, as you can imagine, quite challenging to get to Antarctica in the wintertime and spend time down here and to do the actual research. So there was another gap there. And then the reason we're focusing on diet is because krill are omnivorous. And actually, the title of my project is The Omnivore's Dilemma.
Yeah.
And credit to, was it Michael Pollan?
Michael Pollan, yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's what I thought.
Love it. Yeah.
Credit to him for coming up with the really catchy name. But I chose The Omnivore's Dilemma because krill are omnivores. They eat both microscopic algae, so in particular diatoms, and also they eat other small zooplankton, things like copepods, which are small crustaceans. And along the Antarctic Peninsula, because of climate change, the amount of diatoms has decreased and the amount of copepods has increased. And so there's a sort of shift in food available to Antarctic krill in the wintertime. And so what we really wanted to do was to understand how this might affect the health and physiology of juvenile krill in the winter. And so we have this big experiment. We collect juvenile krill when we come south to Palmer Station from the ship, and we keep them in big tanks throughout the entire winter. So for 5 months, we keep them alive and we feed them different types of food. And then at sort of roughly monthly intervals, we run a whole suite of experiments on them to look at their growth rates and their respiration. And then we take samples to look at their lipids and protein, essentially, and caloric content, essentially just trying to understand how well they're doing and how that their diet is affecting that.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I think there's a lot of stuff, like we talk obviously a lot about whales, and some of course some species of whale, including and cetaceans, bottlenose dolphins and southern resident killer whales are like some of the most well-studied animals in the world. So we forget when there's stuff like that other species of animals, and especially something so small and so hard to get to for the last hundreds of years, we don't know so much about the basics before we can even get to other stuff. We have to learn all the stuff about how they do this, how they survive, and what they're, how they grow, how they breathe, all the stuff. And we have to do all of that. And that's super important to killer whales as well. So yeah, that's really cool. Yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, there's actually a PhD student in my lab she's going to have a chapter on this in her dissertation. Most of her work is off the coast of Oregon, but she's going to have an Antarctic chapter too. She's here with us right now. And she's looked at the caloric content of the krill and how their diet affects their caloric content as prey to high trophic levels, because she's really interested actually in whales and their food. And it does have a huge difference. We got some preliminary results in, and what they eat matters. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Cool.
What sort of further research and actions do you think are necessary to keep krill at a healthy level, or get them back to a healthy level in the Southern Ocean in particular?
I think that, so the marine protected areas, I think, are just by far and away the most important thing. And there are a number of them that have been proposed. There is especially a sort of series of connected marine protected areas that have been proposed for the Antarctic Peninsula, for the Western Antarctic Peninsula. That's been proposed by Chile and Argentina combined, but I know that each year they put it forward to CAMLA. It's sort of turned down because CAMLA is a full consensus, obviously. Yeah. So if there's any nation that disagrees, it doesn't go through. But I really believe that would be a critical step that is necessary in order to try to maintain the krill population for the higher trophic levels that live along the Western Antarctic Peninsula, and then for sustainability for the fishery even. I think continued research, long-term research in this area is also incredibly valuable, because it is really only with continued sustained research efforts that we've been able to tell that Antarctic krill that the population itself has started to decline, and that the center of the population has shifted southwards. Without a long-term sort of continuous monitoring of the species, we would not have been able to tell that. And so I think ensuring that there is sufficient funding and resources that this sort of work can continue is going to be vital.
So you've been obviously studying krill for quite some time, as you mentioned. What are some of the important changes that you have seen over time that you haven't touched on already?
I guess what I'll say, it's got actually nothing to do with krill, because I did just mention the fact that the population was declining. But having come down to Palmer Station, the same place year after year, the first summer I spent here was in the austral summer of 2010, 2011. And I have seen whole islands appearing out from the glacier because of how fast the glacier here is receding. I think that to me is the most astonishing thing to have witnessed in my lifetime. And it's not even my lifetime. It's sort of in the last 15 years or so. So it's really, that is eye-opening. And I think in addition to that, in my early years of coming down here, we used to go to Torgerson Island, which is just across the way from us from here at Palmer Station, and there's an Adelie penguin breeding colony there, and that has just become, it's just really plummeted. The population has really plummeted, and there's a lot of work that's been done there by the Palmer LTR project that they've shown the dramatic decrease in the numbers. But it's one thing to look at a graph showing this decline, to actually know that you've been there and you've seen it in these different stages. I mean, I obviously never saw it when it was at its height, but I can definitely see the difference. So yeah, I think that's that, and the fact that last year when I was here, it rained all the way through the whole winter. Not consistently, but we were getting rain in winter in Antarctica.
Wow. Yeah. That's intense.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. With all these changes, we talked about how it's affecting the animals and also the krill. So how is the ecosystem coping? How are they adapting to this climate change, as if they even are?
I don't know if they're adapting to it necessarily. I mean, if we look at the ecosystem, so the Adelie penguins seem not to be able to adapt as quickly as the change is happening. So their population really is sort of crashing in this northern part of the Antarctic peninsula. Other species are coming in from the north. So gentoo penguins are becoming really abundant down here right now. And so, there's always going to be the winners and the losers of the climate change battle, I guess.
Yeah.
Antarctic krill themselves are incredibly flexible and adaptable, at least from what we've seen and what I've seen and what my colleagues have seen. But we know that their population, that their total numbers have started declining, and we know that the center of the population is shifting south, and there are links between decreasing sea ice and the change in the abundance and distribution of Antarctic krill. So, how their populations will fare in the future is yet to be seen. But I think, given their critical role in this ecosystem and in the biogeochemical cycles globally, I think it's really important that we understand more about them as a species and are better able to predict how they are, if they're either going to adapt or not to future changes, because it's going to have a huge impact on this whole system.
So bringing it back to whales, because that's our personal favorites, do you have any insider observations about the relationship as the whale populations post massive amounts of commercial whaling are coming back, and then the krill population shifts and population decline? Any sort of observations or
I know there have been studies looking at that, and papers that have sort of hypothesized that the decrease in krill may be the result of this sort of sudden surge and increase in humpback whales, I think, in particular.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's one of those things that I think it's really hard to disentangle the various causes and effects. And I mean, whether krill are declining because whales are increasing, or because climate change is worsening, or because the fishing is increasing, or perhaps it is just a complicated combination of those and likely other factors that we haven't considered. So I think it's probably too early to say whether or not the whales themselves are having a negative impact. Yeah, but I do know that when there's lots of krill, there are whales.
Yeah,
they have a good way of really good. Yeah, they're really good at finding the krill. Yes.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Well, one of the things that we always like to talk about when it comes to the cetaceans on our podcast is what our favorite fun flipper fact is for whichever species we're highlighting in that episode. But since we're focused on krill today, we were wondering if you could share with us what your favorite krill fact is.
I think there's a lot of really cool krill facts, but one of the things that I find really funny and also sometimes frustrating is that they're incredibly good at escaping. So they have this full escape response where they sort of fold themselves in half, and like I just like clap my hands, but it's as if they kind of like, is it clams that swim backwards like that? They're so good at doing that. And it's a bit frustrating too, because when I'm trying to grab one with a forceps, like I use these really soft insect forceps so that they don't hurt the krills. So I can do some live experiments with them. I'm trying to grab them with that. If they have any idea of what's happening, they're zooming around the bucket and I can't catch them. It's really hilarious. And then also when there's a lot of krill in the water column. So like one of the summers I was here, I was out in the Zodiac doing acoustic surveys, surrounded by a ton of humpbacks, and there was krill from the surface of the water down to the seafloor. It's shallow right here, but there was just krill everywhere. And as we were going over with the Zodiac, the ones at the surface were literally popping out like popcorn because they were doing this escape response thing and jumping out of the water. It's really cool, but it's why they are difficult to catch, and they're very wily.
Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine. They're just so crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent a lot of my career trying to catch various animals of various descriptions, terrestrial, aquatic, flying, etc. But none have been
trying to do that.
Like 2.5 inches long, so I can't even imagine.
You know, like
it just makes it so much harder.
That movie Karate Kid when his trainer is catching, I think he has to catch flies with chopsticks. It's a little bit like that. Yes.
Yeah.
That's over.
Like,
yeah.
Yes, you catch it in the first go, otherwise
they
there's no hope.
They seem to have a they seem to know.
They know what's happening
anywhere.
Okay. Right response.
All right, so another one of the questions we like to ask everybody on here, and you've already touched on some, is what is your favorite, most memorable whale encounter, or maybe rarest species or behavior you have seen? Anything that really sticks in your mind, because we always like to bring the conversation back to cetaceans. It's who we are.
Well, I've had some amazing whale encounters when I'm out looking for krill. I feel like talking to a bunch of whale enthusiasts and whale researchers. I'm sure you've all had.
Well, we'd love to hear everybody's
exciting.
It does not get old. Never gets old.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was the Christmas of one of the summers that I was here, and we were out, my field assistant and I were out in a Zodiac doing our acoustic survey, which is how we map the krill, and there were just krill everywhere, as I mentioned, from the surface down to the seafloor. And we stopped, I think, to have a lunch break. Anyway, so we were like floating, we'd sort of, we'd put into neutral and we're eating our sandwiches on the boat. And these two humpback whales, so we're not supposed to go up to any of the mammals or birds, and so we kept our distance, but we'd stopped the boat and they came right up to us, and we were sort of sitting there quietly. We're like, well, do we move? Do we not move? We're just going to sit as still as we can, and try not to disturb them. And they took turns. There were two of them, and first the one went underneath the Zodiac, and I was like, oh my God, where is it? And I leant over the pontoon, and I was sort of looking in the water, like, where did it go? And I just see this massive eyeball coming out from underneath, just like literally right under there, and it sort of looked at me, and then I think it was a sort of like pectoral fin that came up just like right next to the boat, and as it sort of rolled and went off, and then the second one did the exact same thing, and just having this eyeball looking up at me was incredible. I was oh my gosh, I was blown away. It was amazing. That was probably my favorite and closest
definitely
whale encounter out here.
It's amazing.
It's incredible.
That's amazing.
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah,
they're so magical.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Kim, for taking the time and for nerding out with krill with us. And
that was super fun. I think it's so great that we're introducing krill to the world, World Krill Day. They're important.
Next up, we have Jen Walsh, who is a research biologist with the Antarctic Ecosystem Research Division at the Southwest Fisheries Science Center. Her research focuses on the trophic ecology of Antarctic krill, and she studies the distribution and abundance of krill around the northern Antarctic Peninsula in relation to chlorophyll concentration.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for joining us on this podcast for World Krill Day. We're super excited to talk to you about your research and also your comics. So can we start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jen Walsh, and I am a research biologist with the Antarctic Ecosystem Research Division of the Southwest Fisheries Science Center for, I know, it's a long introduction. And the Southwest Fisheries Science Center is part of the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Okay. That's a lot. How did you...
It is a lot. I know, it's a mouthful.
Yeah. How did you end up studying krill in the Antarctic?
It was a total accident on my part. So I did my undergrad in marine biology at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And I actually worked with marine mammals for a long time and then decided that just really wasn't for me. It's not what I wanted to do. And so I ended up going back to school for a master's degree in marine science. And I had a committee member who needed a technician to work on Antarctic fur seals with him right after I defended my thesis. And so I didn't have a job lined up. I defended, and I'm like, okay, what now? And he said, well, if you want to go to Antarctica, nobody turns that down.
No.
So I said, sure, sign me up. I'll go to Antarctica. What do you need me to do? And he said, well, I need you to sort poop. I was like, okay, that's cool. I'll do that.
Yep.
So I sorted a lot of fur seal poop, and what I was looking for was evidence of what they ate, because your poop can tell you a lot about your diet. So I was going through and I was finding krill carapaces, because krill is a major food source for Antarctic fur seals. And at the risk of sounding kind of gross, krill carapaces are a little bit like corn. Like, you don't digest them, so you can identify it when it comes out the other end.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can find those intact krill carapaces and you can measure them, the dimensions of them, you can estimate the size of the krill that the fur seal ate. That's a lot of information for us in terms of what the prey field is like out there for them. So I did that, and I also extracted lipid from milk samples that he was collecting from female Antarctic fur seals while they were lactating and raising their young. And lipid extractions was something I had done for my master's degree, so I already knew how to do that.
Very handy.
And so I did that for a couple of years in Antarctica on a research vessel, which was a great job for a seasick person, sorting poop. Yeah. And then after a couple of years, our program wasn't able to afford to go out to sea during the summer anymore. And we ended up doing a series of these 5 winter cruises in Antarctica, which was really, really cool because not a lot of people get to go to Antarctica during the winter. And there's not a lot of data about anything in Antarctica during the winter. However, our field camps where all of these fur seal samples were collected during the summertime, they're not open during the wintertime because our field camps are very remote and very basic. They're not like the larger field stations that people might be more familiar with. So I still wanted to go out to sea, but I didn't have these fur seal samples to work on. So I came up with the idea, well, what if I did these lipid extractions and maybe some other biochemical analyses on krill themselves and other zooplankton? Because again, just not much is known about them during the winter, not much is known about their diets, not much is known about how they respond to differences in sea ice concentrations. And so I went out to sea for 5 winters in a row, and I built this really cool data set of lipid content, which tells you about body condition and just the general health of krill during the winter time, and also stable isotopes, which tell you about their trophic position, where they are on the food chain. Anyway, so I went out to sea for these 5 winters, and I collected all this data, and that's kind of how I ended up studying krill. It was just kind of a happy accident, really.
Yeah. That's so
really cool.
Great.
And now I don't have to study poop anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Yay!
I
Win-win.
transitioned from post-digested krill to pre-digested krill, which has been a really nice change.
That must,
Smells
that
better,
must be nice.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, it smells better.
So what would you like people to know about krill, Jen? Why are they important?
Well, krill are the foundation of the Antarctic food web. They are so important for fish, for marine mammals, anything from seals to whales. They're important for many, many species of seabirds, penguins, and several of the species that we study at our field camps they're krill dependent during the breeding season. And these animals, these Antarctic fur seals and these penguins that our program studies, they reproduce on land. So fur seals give birth on land and penguins hatch their chicks on land. And they have to make these cyclical trips to sea to feed their young while they're raising their young. And so if there are not enough krill in the vicinity of where these animals are raising their young, that means they have to travel farther, be gone longer, and potentially not come back with as much energy to transfer to their young. And that also leaves their young, their chicks, and their pups vulnerable to predation from other animals, like leopard seals, for example. That's a big issue in our study area. So if there are not very many krill, then that really makes that population vulnerable. So again, they're the foundation of the food web down there, and without them, we wouldn't have all of those other, iconic, charismatic animals that people are more familiar with. So they're super important to the entire ecosystem.
Yeah. So what is going on with krill right now in the Southern Ocean?
Well, it really depends regionally. Antarctica, it's not the same all the way around the continent. And so I can speak really about the northern Antarctic Peninsula, because that's the area that I'm familiar with. That's where all of our studies is there. But what I say about that region might not hold true for other areas of Antarctica, like areas farther west along the peninsula or east Antarctica. But what we've noticed in our area is, the biomass of krill, which is what our program is responsible for measuring each year, it does fluctuate on an annual basis. But evidence suggests that the biomass has declined and that it's also contracting south as waters warm and there's less and less sea ice. Populations of krill are also moving south to follow the thicker water and to follow the sea ice. And so what I was talking about with those krill-dependent predators that breed on land but have to go to sea, that poses a big problem for them, because now krill are moving out of the range that is feasible for them to go and feed on while they're raising their young. So climate change is definitely having a big impact on not only krill, but the animals that rely on them to survive throughout the breeding season.
And then when it comes to your research on that and the data that you're collecting from the pre-digested krill, why is that data important to what's going on in the area?
That is an excellent question. I'm going to try to break this down in non-jargon terms, which hopefully I can do. So as the climate changes in Antarctica, as there is less sea ice, particularly during winter, and as the ocean gets warmer, that changes a lot of things about the ocean. And one of the major things that changes is the species composition of the phytoplankton that's available down there. So when it's warmer and the water is more stratified and there's less ice, we tend to see this shift towards these smaller species of phytoplankton. And krill really, they're going to feed on phytoplankton. They like diatoms and bigger, kind of lipid-rich phytoplankton species. And these smaller species, they're just not, they don't efficiently feed on them very much. So we've noticed in years where there's been less sea ice than other years that the phytoplankton community is dominated by these small species, and krill just don't feed as effectively. So I think it's really important to take a look at what krill are eating and what their body condition is like as these environmental changes are happening. And definitely throughout these 5 years of data that I collected, I noticed that in years where we didn't have a lot of sea ice, where we didn't have a lot of diatoms, the body condition of krill is definitely inferior to the body condition of krill when there were a lot of diatoms and a lot of sea ice, and they have these more lipid-rich kind of quality resources to feed on during the winter time. And I think those are the things we're going to need to start paying attention to as the climate continues to change and we start seeing less and less sea ice. For example, I think this coming winter in Antarctica, well, it's not coming, it's winter now, is on track to be the lowest sea ice winter in Antarctica on record. And I think if that, in combination with an El Nino that they're predicting, is going to have major consequences for krill, particularly along the Antarctic Peninsula, because along the western Antarctic Peninsula, when there are El Nino years, we tend to see warmer conditions and a lot less sea ice. And I think that's going to really negatively impact krill populations along the western Antarctic Peninsula for sure. So for me, looking at stable isotopes and whether krill are feeding on phytoplankton or zooplankton, looking at their lipid content and their body condition, and trying to monitor over time how they're going to respond to these changes in their environment, particularly warming and less sea ice, is going to be really, really important in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So I believe you're using gliders in your research. So what are they? How do they work? And why was this type of research or methodology implemented?
So it was implemented. I'll start there. We used to go to sea every year, whether it was in the summer or the winter, annually, because we have a congressional mandate from the U.S. government to actually study the marine ecosystem in Antarctica, so that we can provide advice to organizations that manage the fishery. After 2016 or so, our programs couldn't afford to go to sea anymore. It costs a lot to charter a research vessel in Antarctica for a month at a time. And particularly during the winter, it was costing us in excess of $60,000 a day to charter to be in Antarctica. So that was not possible for us anymore. But we still have this congressional mandate. So how are we going to continue to provide this ecosystem data without a research vessel? And gliders were kind of the really obvious answer to that. So gliders they look like enormous yellow torpedoes with wings. They are not explosive.
Good.
Important to distinguish. And they are incredibly cost efficient, and they can carry a ton of the same sensors that we use on the ship to collect data about the marine ecosystem. So we have echo sounders on them that can still estimate krill biomass. We have an optical sensor on them that can still measure chlorophyll concentration in the water. So we can get an idea of what the primary productivity is like in the water column. We can't necessarily break that down to species, but at least we can get an idea of how much primary productivity is happening. There's an oxygen sensor on them, which also tells us a little bit about the primary productivity. There's a CTD on them, which stands for conductivity, temperature, depth, which tells us about the temperature, the salinity. So all of those things that we use to measure from a ship, we can still measure with a glider. And we can do that without having to, A, charter a vessel for tens of thousands of dollars each day, and B, pay a whole staff of scientists to collect real-time samples, process real-time samples. So it ends up being a huge cost savings for us. And these gliders have 3 enormous lithium batteries in them. And they're incredibly energy efficient, and they just perform these sawtooth dive patterns. They can dive down to 1,000 meters, which also is deeper than we would ever sample from the ship. So they've increased kind of the depth of the ocean that we can sample. They can travel in excess of 1,000 kilometers during a 2 to 3 month deployment. So they've also increased the amount of space that we can cover. And so they've been a super duper cost effective way for us to still maintain our presence in Antarctica, still collect all of these really important data that we need. And so they're a really great addition. They come with a huge learning curve. If you're not a technologically savvy person, like I am not, they are not easy to learn how to use. But once you kind of master that, it's been 5 or 6 years now, and I don't know, maybe 70% of the way there. But they have allowed us to maintain our program and still collect really, really cool data about the Antarctic. And we've recently incorporated cameras onto them, so now we can even get pictures of krill and other zooplankton down there, which is really exciting. So they've been a really good way for us to keep collecting data without having to pay a staff and charter a vessel.
They sound so cool, and I feel like I just have this like little spaceship in my mind picturing it. Do you have videos that you could share?
I have I have still pictures. I
Yeah.
don't have a video of
Photos
of
would
a
be great.
glider, but I have still pictures of gliders that I can share. Sure.
I'm so fascinated to like understand how they go in the water and then back up, because all I'm picturing in my mind are like diving birds, and I've never thought of a person-made object doing that sort of thing like a diving bird. So.
Well, they're really slow. So diving birds are kind of fast,
like
and they
super
go
fast,
fast on their prey.
Yeah.
Gliders move at an average speed of about 20 centimeters a second.
Oh, that's
So we are not talking about something
diving
that's
birds.
going
Okay.
super fast.
Recalculating everything in my head also makes a lot more sense.
They creep along. So one dive down to about 960 meters and back up takes about 4 hours.
That makes way more sense.
So
but also, if they're
not
measuring
fast.
things that much, then yes,
They're
that would be
measuring
necessary.
things.
Yeah.
That's also great for us, though, because there are things that we want to avoid hitting.
Yeah.
Ships, icebergs, you
Yep.
know, patches of sea ice in general, not necessarily icebergs. And what's great about gliders is that when they do hit something, it's not this like catastrophic
thing.
You know, wham! Oh my God, the glider hit something and it disintegrated. It just kind of bumps into things, which is wonderful.
Yeah,
Because
it's
even
much
if it
better.
gets stuck under an iceberg, which has happened before, it'll just kind of bump its way out from under the iceberg. And so it might not surface when you expect it, and then you start to panic, oh my God, I've lost the glider. And then it eventually surfaces, and then you can see in the dive pattern that it was bouncing around something not quite on the surface. And you're like, oh, okay, it was stuck under something. But if they moved faster, they would, like, I don't know, just blow to bits when they impacted something. So it's not like that. So it's actually kind of great that they move slow.
I love that.
Yes, that is great.
Okay, so you've talked a lot about your research. Now we get to give you an opportunity to do a call out. Like, what further research and actions do you think are necessary to ensure that krill are remaining at this healthy level that we'd like to see them in the Southern Ocean?
Well, that's the question of the day. And I think that, you know, continuing to study them and understand how their populations respond to climate change is really all we can do, and then manage the krill fishery appropriately. For those circumstances. You know, in terms of saving the krill population, like, I don't know what else we can do except stop what we're doing to warm the planet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just understanding how it's going to change and how krill are going to keep moving south, are their population stabilized, so what's going to happen to them. Those are all things that we don't have a great grasp on and we need to understand. So it's hard to say what do we need to do to save krill populations, because again, it's not like we can, you know, do what we do with some critically endangered larger animals, like put them into zoos and aquariums and try to reintroduce them to the wild.
Yeah.
But I think we just need to understand how they're going to respond, what kind of management things we need to do as we understand how their populations change, how populations of animals that depend on krill change as their prey field changes, and then go from there. Like, it's kind of a weird question to answer, because it's hard to say how to save krill except to
for sure
stop warming the planet.
Yeah. Although I am now thinking about a krill aquarium, which I think probably would look like a flea circus, which is just like water, or like sea monkeys.
Sting.
Yeah.
You see the
Just
movie
like-
Sting, where they have all the squid in the window?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever we can do to stop and potentially reverse what we've done would be great. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know. Even if we were to stop emitting carbon today,
what would happen?
The environment to recover. But I think all we can do is study them as best we can and understand what's going to happen in the future, whether that's based on real data that we collect or models that we can generate to kind of project into the future of what the populations are going to look like. But we just need to study them more and hopefully have people come to their senses.
Yeah. So moving to slightly less dire topics, tell us about your Instagram comic, The Scholarly Krill, and why you were inspired to start it and what you hope to share with people by having these awesome little comics that I'm enjoying greatly anyway.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
I think it was kind of a pandemic project for me. We were all stuck at home for a while and we're not interacting with each other as much as we used to. I really enjoy science communication. It's kind of one of my passions. And I write a blog for Noah's website about red gliders, where I just like to tell stories about science. And for me in particular, working for a U.S. government agency, like our science is funded by taxpayers. And so I do think that federal scientists in particular, we have an obligation to communicate to the public what we're doing and why what we do is not only beneficial for the environment, but beneficial for them as taxpayers. We need to demonstrate that what they're spending their money on has value.
Yeah.
So I really, really like writing these stories and telling you stories about science in non-scientific terms, again, in story form, in ways that people can understand what we're doing. And so I do that for work. But then I during the pandemic, I got this drawing tablet and I was learning how to use it. And I was really enjoying just doodling and drawing this really silly Krill. And I was like, oh, I wonder if I could just make cartoons about this and then just have like an educational fact about Krill once a week, a Krill fact once a week, and have a cartoon to go with it. And I'd always kind of resisted social media. I'm not really a big social media person. But well, I can do a once a week cartoon. I can manage that. And I didn't think anybody would look at it except my mom and a couple of friends that I bribed to follow me. And now I think I'm up to 400 followers, which I know, if you're going to be an influencer, it's not a huge amount of followers. But I mean, it was built from nothing.
Yeah.
And it's been really fun. And a lot of people have found it by accident. And I've had the Pew Charitable Trust reached out to me, and the U.S. National Science Foundation reached out to me, and so it's been really, really fun, and it's gotten a lot of attention. And it was just a way for me to kind of draw attention to krill, draw attention to climate change in a way, again, that's accessible for people and not scientific and not jargon, which is kind of a fun way to make people aware of krill, their role in the ecosystem, and the challenges that they face with climate change.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, on the science communication front, one of the things that we love to do on our podcast are what we call fun flipper facts, where each month we pick what's our favorite fact about that species. So what is one of your favorite facts about krill?
Favorite facts about krill? I don't know. I just think they're cute.
Yeah. I agree.
But, yeah. I'm trying to think of a favorite. I should have been more ready for this question.
It's okay.
It's okay. We like to spring it on people so that they answer.
But I feel like I should have an answer ready for that. Like I should just immediately be like, oh, krill. I do like that when they've eaten a lot of diatoms, they look green.
Oh, that is cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, especially during the summertime when you're eating a lot of phytoplankton, which is phytoplankton bloom, you're eating a lot of diatoms. Their whole kind of abdomen and their digestive gland looks bright green. I think it's pretty fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think they're pretty cool to study, and I like that they support our whole ecosystem. But people always study them in terms of being a prey item for other animals and for being a target of a fishery. They are a target of a major fishery in Antarctica. But I kind of like studying them for who they are.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's adorable. Yeah, I like it.
Give krill some love for being krill, not just a prey item or a notch on the food chain.
Exactly. So on that note, I'm going to completely switch that and say, in all of your studies with krill, because we are a whale podcast, what was your favorite whale encounter, or maybe rarest, most unique, one that sticks out in your mind?
My favorite whale. Oh, I have an answer for this.
Oh, perfect.
Actually. I'm not a whale biologist, but my very, very first trip to Antarctica, I was on this big Russian vessel, and that was during the time when I was still in post-digestive krill world. So I was sorting poop.
Yep.
And I was at my microscope in this little tiny lab, and sorting poop, and I'd been sorting poop for several hours, and I had a little tiny porthole window in my lab, and I just happened to look up at the same moment that I saw like a splash, and I didn't know what it was, but it was an unusual splash. So I got up and I looked out the porthole, and I saw like a giant fork flipper like just come out of the water and then hit down, and it was right next to the boat, like so close. I thought I imagined that I had seen it at first. And the cruise that I was on was mostly a fish survey, so I was just this weird person off to the side sorting fur seal poop. But everybody else was up on deck processing a net haul of fish that they had just brought up. And everybody was focused on what they were doing. Nobody was looking up. They were in this little lab on the deck of the ship sorting their fish. And so nobody had any idea that there was this whale like right next to the side of the ship. And so I ran up to the deck and I was trying to get people's attention. I'm like, hey, hey! And nobody was listening to me, and I'm screaming at them, hey! And then finally I just screamed, oh, really weird. And that gets people's attention. Everybody stops at this thing and look up, and I'm like, wow, there's a whale! And I'm pointing off the side of the deck, so everybody abandons what they're doing. Everybody runs up to the bow of the ship, and there were 2 humpback whales. Oh. And they put on an amazing show. They weren't breaching, but they were feeding, and they were, flapping their pectoral fins, and just kind of twirling around on the surface of the water. And they stayed there for maybe a good 20 minutes, just hanging out. I don't know if we just sailed the ship through a big patch of whatever they were feeding on. I don't know why they happened to be there, but it was quite remarkable, and that was probably the closest and the longest I've ever been to whales. And it was cool that it was in the Antarctic, and I have some great pictures of it. The pictures are almost not that great because they were too close.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We know that feeling.
Yeah. Good pictures of like the whole whale. I could get like a part of a whale. So that will always stick out in my memory as one of my favorite times that I saw whales. Because I grew up in Southern California. I've been out on whale watching trips, and I've seen gray whales off of our coaster a lot. But nothing is like that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's a good one. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for sharing that story with us. Jen, was there anything that we missed that you wanted to touch on while you were chatting with us?
I'm excited that you're doing a little episode about krill, because I know krill aren't whales, but they are super important to whale populations.
Absolutely.
And this is only the second World Krill Day ever coming up on August 11th, so I'm excited to see that people are really noticing it, and people are really making effort to bring awareness to krill and how important they are, particularly in Antarctica. But krill are found all over the world, all over in world's oceans everywhere. So, they're major parts of marine ecosystems everywhere, and so I'm excited to see that they're finally getting the love that they deserve, because they're very cool in their own right, but also as prey on them. So, I'm just happy to talk about them and happy that people are excited about them. And,
we've loved talking to you about them. Thanks so much for teaching us so much.
Thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. This was fun.
That was great. And if you are listening today, or any day, but especially on World Krill Day, be sure to head over to Jen's Instagram to check out all of the comics. I'm super in love with her krill comics. They're adorable, and they make me love krill even more than I already do.
Indeed.
Which is impressive. Next up, we have Nicole Bransome, who works on Pew's Protecting Antarctica's Southern Ocean project, which focuses on conserving an area that encompasses 10% of the world's ocean through the creation of a network of large-scale marine protected areas around Antarctica. Nikki's going to talk to us about more of the MPA and the logistic sides of protecting krill and the Antarctic. So welcome, Nikki. Thank you so much for being here. Can you, just to start, tell us a bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Absolutely, Lindsay. Thank you to you and your team for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about one of my favorite animals, krill, and of course the whales that depend on them. So I work with the Pew Bertarelli Ocean Legacy Project. It's part of the Pew Charitable Trust. We are based in Washington, D.C., and I work on a project that is focused on protecting the ocean around Antarctica. We work with an international group called the Commission for the Conservation of International Marine Living Resources, and we are working with this international multilateral body to help them achieve their goals of creating a large-scale network of marine protected areas, as well as ecosystem-based fisheries management measures for the Antarctic krill fishery. And I am actually trained as a marine ecologist by background.
Okay, great.
Cool. So obviously we're talking about krill today, so can you just give us like a quick, what is krill, especially for people who maybe are like, krill's just what whales eat, but like, it's more than that.
Absolutely. So krill are these really important crustaceans that are thought to actually have the largest weight of any animal species on the planet other than humans at this time. So yes, they're classified as zooplankton, but so normally people think about zooplankton as these tiny animals that are found in aquatic environments, maybe even microscopic, but krill are actually not microscopic at all. They're about the size of a human adult pinky, and they're bigger than many commonly sold shrimp species that you might find in the grocery store or at a restaurant. And their Latin name actually is Euphausia superba, which means that they are the biggest and most superb species of all krill on the planet.
Sounds
that.
like somebody who really loved krill was in charge of naming, giving them their Latin name.
They're hard not to love once you know more about them.
So then, what makes krill so important?
Yeah, so one thing that's really important about krill is that while, you know, they may be 2.5 inches, they form these massive swarms that can actually be seen from space. And so it's because there's so many of them and they have these swarms that they're so important. So they can actually remove carbon from the atmosphere, and they also serve as a critical food source for many different Antarctic species, from emperor penguins to chinstrap and Adelie penguins to leopard seals, and of course all the different whale species that you all love. So actually most of the animal species in the Antarctic either eat krill or eat something that eat krill. And then in terms of their role in the biological cycling of nutrients, what they do regarding carbon is, near the surface of the ocean, they feed on algae that have absorbed carbon from the atmosphere, and these massive swarms migrate down to the depths of the ocean, and then they excrete their waste, and in that way they're transferring large amounts of carbon to the depths of the ocean. And it's estimated that the amount of carbon they can store each year in the deep ocean is equivalent to taking about 35 million cars off of the road.
Whoa.
Wow. Wow.
Okay, so they're important then. You've convinced me.
Indeed.
Okay. Wow, that's... So, species of whales in Antarctica do eat krill. So we've got humpbacks, fin whales...
Yeah, so the species that the whale species that depend on krill in the Antarctic are humpbacks, fin whales, minke whales, blue whales, and sei whales.
Cool. So cool. Lots of the main ones that are baleen ones.
Yeah,
for
lots
sure.
of the main ones.
All the big baleen whales.
And it's actually been shown, there's some new research that's come out showing, you know, exactly how much krill are eaten by these whales. And for one really small area, so this area around the tip of the Antarctic Peninsula, where there's actually a commercial fishery for krill, it's shown that in this one area, the humpbacks and the fin whales alone are eating about 2 million metric tons of krill combined each year. And just so for some perspective, in that one area, the fishery is, well, the whales are eating about 13 times as much krill as the fishery in that area where it's currently concentrating.
Wow. So that's a question that I think when we talk about how much, because, you know, everybody knows the stat about blue whales eating so much a day, and we were just saying about the humpbacks and fins. Do we know how much krill there is in the world, or just in Antarctica? Like, for a perspective of what percentage of that population?
Yeah, so let's see. In that broader region around the Antarctic Peninsula, there's about 60 million tons. So this is, I guess, 2 million is a good chunk of that, 60 million. And then I think it's estimated that around the entire Antarctic continent, there's somewhere around 400 million tons of krill.
Okay. Wow. So a lot, but this is still an issue because we're talking about it and there is a fishery. So what is happening right now in the Southern Ocean to krill?
Right. So two main things are happening with krill. Well, climate change and industrial fishing are fundamentally altering this unique system, and krill are no exception. So what's happening is that the commercial fishery for krill has become extremely concentrated in recent years. And the majority of catch is taken from really small nearshore areas where penguins, whales, and other predators feed. And so it's this localized depletion of krill combined with the impacts of climate change that's actually having a negative impact on the predators. And there's some evidence already that penguin health in particular is being negatively impacted. And there's been some declines in the health and vitality of some of the Antarctic penguins in the Antarctic Peninsula region. And in addition, just to dive in a little bit more on climate change, so krill have adapted their life cycle to be totally reliant on sea ice. And some of the places where krill live, in particular the Antarctic Peninsula, are amongst the fastest warming places on Earth. And so warming has caused the krill to shift their population south. They're losing habitat, and scientists are predicting that this habitat size is going to continue to shrink. And acidification is also having a negative impact on krill. And lab studies show that the acidification has a negative impact on the development of krill eggs, which could actually lead to a collapse of the population by 2300 if things don't change with regard to ocean acidification.
Jeez. So obviously very serious.
Very serious.
What is being done to address these threats?
So there's this body called CAMLAR. It's the Commission for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources. It was established in 1982 in response to the growth of the fleet for krill around the Antarctic. And it has conservation as its primary objective, and it's been called the Krill Convention. And nowadays it has 27 members, and it has to make decisions by consensus. And it has a mandate to prevent fishing from causing an irreversible impact on the ecosystem. And so it's supposed to only allow fishing when it can be proven that that fishing isn't having a negative impact over the long term on the fish species or the species that depend on it. So CAMLAR is considering two tools to alleviate stress on krill and the ecosystem. So those are marine protected areas and ecosystem-based fisheries management measures. Marine protected areas are areas of the ocean that are managed to conserve nature for the long term by restricting activities, including fishing. And the science is clear that MPAs can produce positive ecological outcomes, including increased biodiversity and species densities. And by minimizing other threats, MPAs can build resilience against climate change. And so, noting the value of marine protected areas, this organization, CAMLAR, in 2011 agreed by consensus to create a network of large-scale MPAs for the Southern Ocean. And to date, they've adopted 2 of these MPAs in the South Orkney Islands and in the Ross Sea. Cool. And there's 3 additional MPAs that have been proposed and are ready to be designated. And those are in the East Antarctic, the Weddell Sea, and the Antarctic Peninsula region. And then the other thing CAMLAR is considering and developing is for the waters adjacent to the marine protected areas. CAMLAR is working to implement a science-based, ecosystem-based fisheries management plan that would spread the catch out in space and over the seasons throughout the year to ease pressure of the fishery taking food from predators.
Cool. So I'm guessing there's probably some people who are surprised that krill is a commercial fishery because you don't see it at the grocery store, as far as I know. Can you talk about why it's a commercial fishing interest?
Yeah, so krill is mostly fish for luxury products. It's not fish for human sustenance. So as you said, you wouldn't currently see it in the seafood section at your grocery store. But the products that are made from krill are omega-3 oil supplements. So you might see those in the, your vitamin section. So, for human need. And then also krill's being used to feed animals, in particular farmed fish like salmon.
Cool. Well, not cool.
No, not so cool. I feel like you've touched on this a lot, but politically, the situation regarding the management of the fishery outside of CAMLAR, what's sort of where are the other pressures coming against CAMLAR with this fishery?
Right. So several countries have strong fishing interests. So Norway takes the most krill currently, and then that's followed by Korea and China, and then Chile and Ukraine. And, as the Antarctic continues to warm, it's important to protect this important place prior to any increase in fishing pressure. And so I mentioned the MPAs that have already been adopted. The last one that was adopted was the Ross Sea MPA that was adopted in 2016. And it's actually the world's largest protected area. But since that time, two of the CAMLR members in particular, Russia and China, have voiced opposition to adopting the proposed MPA proposals, and this has prevented CAMLR from reaching the consensus that it needs for designation. But CAMLR has another opportunity this October. It's set to decide on both the MPA network and advancing ecosystem-based management at the upcoming annual meeting that happens in Hobart, Tasmania.
So I think, this is a question that I have, because it's Antarctica, and it's not like it's got a White House or anything like that. So what happens once CAMLR decides on something? Who puts those kind of into place, and who, enforces them and stuff?
So CAMLR decisions are made and enforced by the members. So it's 26 different countries in the European Union that are the members. So it is up to the collective as well as, the individual governments to work together to put these things in place, and then to ensure that what CAMLR has decided is being reflected in terms of the domestic rules and laws.
And something I think I feel this way. I know when we talk to other scientists, you can start to feel this way, but certainly for our listeners, those are all very, very high-level decisions and high-level threats. What can an individual global citizen do to try and make a change and impact krill in a positive way?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And there's a number of things that individuals can do to protect krill and this species like whales that depend on them, ranging from, your personal consumer habits to being vocal about the issue. So anything that you as an individual can do to reduce your carbon emissions is going to help, limit the impact of climate change on the Antarctic. You could also consider alternatives to krill supplements like omega-3s from marine algae. And then in terms of being more vocal about the issue, you could reach out to your government officials to let them know how important Antarctic conservation is to you. But you can also look for ways to spread the word with your friends and family about protecting the Antarctic. You could be active on social media, attend local events. So, one opportunity is you could chime in on social media on World Krill Day, and you could do that by following the hashtag World Krill Day.
Yeah, and celebrate with us.
So we know why krill are important to whales and things like that, but if we're not a whale or a penguin, why should we care about krill?
So Antarctica is a global commons that belongs to all of humanity, and it plays an outsized role in global processes. It stores the majority of human-made carbon and heat that is stored in the ocean. It can play a significant role in sea level rise, and it's, some like to say it's the beating heart of the planet because it actually circulates nutrients to seas around the world and drives productivity for biodiversity and, fisheries and all the other things that we love about the ocean all around the world.
That's amazing. I love that beating heart of the world. Yeah.
Wow. What a great, really powerful analogy.
Yeah. Okay, so I have a new question that I thought about while we were talking. What is your favorite thing about krill?
I think one really cool fact about Antarctic krill is that they can actually glow. Mm-hmm. And they have these photophores, which are organs that allow them to grow. And it's thought that they do this either to sync up with each other while they're swimming, so they kind of maintain structure in their swarm, or as a way to avoid predators, like in the same way that an octopus would shoot out ink to, evade predators. Like krill can emit light potentially to evade its predators.
Whoa. That's really cool.
Excellent.
Excellent answer.
Excellent answer. Also, excellent strategy, because I don't want to eat glowing food. No. If I'm starting to like put a burger towards my mouth and then all of a sudden it's just like, bah, light. I'm like, nope, thank you. Thank you very much.
That's probably
awesome.
a pretty safe approach, yeah.
Amazing. And Nikki, before we go, since obviously krill are very, very, very important to whales, and whales are important to us and our listeners, we always like to ask people we have on the podcast for what's your favorite whale tale. So while you've been doing all of the incredible work and research that you do, have you seen whales? What sorts of species have you seen? And for you, what's one of your favorite whale tales that you've ever experienced?
I think for me, I've had a couple of experiences over the last year where I got to see humpback whales in the wild. And prior to this last year, I had never seen humpback whales. I actually got to see them when I was in Tasmania for the last CAMLAR meeting. I saw them migrating south along the Tasmanian Peninsula. It was a mother and calf, and I saw a similar thing earlier this year in Costa Rica. It was also a mother and calf. And I actually got to go to Antarctica for the first time last year and see a humpback whale there. And so for me, working on this issue for so long and then finally being able to see these animals in the wild was just truly amazing. And that I saw 3 within a year, I think also speaks to the fact that they're rebounding and becoming more plentiful. And so we really need to work even more diligently to take care of them.
Yeah. Ugh. And all over in such different areas as well. It's so cool.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you really wanted to bring up with our listeners or tell us about?
Yeah, I think the one thing I wanted to share is regarding the MPAs. There's one in particular that's been proposed for the Antarctic Peninsula region, and that's the area where the krill fishery is currently concentrated. So this MPA proposal has been put forward by Chile and Argentina, 2 of the CAMLAR members. And what's really cool about this proposal is there's some research that has shown they looked at what would happen under future climate change, and the research has shown that this MPA would protect krill, it would protect the predators that depend on krill, and it would even still have benefits for the fishery that's operating there. So it's kind of a win-win-win. So yeah, I mean, it just seems like a really great way to give everybody interested a fighting chance.
And Nikki, we do have listeners really and truly all over the world to this podcast. So if you know what countries might be sort of in opposition to that MPA, it is possible that we have listeners there who might actually be able to reach out to, like, not when you say like reach out to your MP or reach out to your political representative, if they are in that country and are citizens of that country, they could really, really make their voices heard. Do you know what countries in particular might be most beneficial to reach out to in CAMLAR?
Well, as I said, there's 27 members, and it's important to engage with all of them because of the consensus basis of the organization. Currently, the 2 that have yet to provide their support for these particular MPAs are Russia and China. And it's also important that the fishing countries remember their commitment to MPAs. And so the countries fishing for krill are Norway, China, Korea, Chile, and Ukraine.
Okay. Great.
Thanks so much, Nikki. I loved hearing about all the amazing conservation work that's happening throughout the world in order to protect Antarctica.
Yeah.
Our final guests are Philippe and Ashlan Cousteau. The Cousteaus are journalists, explorers, scholarly entrepreneurs who have a huge voice in the world of filmmaking and conservation. They've traveled the world in search of stories to captivate and inspire us all. As hosts, speakers, authors, filmmakers, entrepreneurs, they use the power of entertainment to save the world. And we were so honored and delighted to get to speak to them, and I hope you really enjoyed this conversation.
So now we are here talking with Ashlan and Philippe Cousteau. Thank you so much for being here, first of all. It's amazing to get to talk to you. Can we start off with who you are and what you've been working on?
Sure. I'll have Philippe start.
Well, we're delighted to be here. First of all, thank you so much for having us. You know, my background is in my whole life in the ocean. You know, someone third generation of a family that has dedicated its life to lives, generations, to exploring, protecting, and crucially restoring the ocean. You know, my grandfather, Jacques Cousteau, it was really about 75 years ago that he co-invented scuba diving, which is a human lifetime, really, right? And so not that long ago that people actually started really exploring the ocean beneath the waves. He invented underwater cameras, and, you know, really through his films and documentary series, The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau was the first to open the world's eyes to what exists in the ocean, which is astonishing. We've spent our entire existence essentially, you know, on or around the ocean, but just a lifetime exploring it. And so my father, Philippe Sr., joined his journey, became the director and producer and chief cinematographer for 26 of those Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau episodes, and was a pioneer in ocean conservation himself. And so, inspired by that legacy, I've, you know, been working in this work from youth education through my nonprofit Earth Echo International, to films, documentaries, books, all sorts of mischief for essentially my entire life, really.
And I kind of came into this partnership a little differently. So I am a Southern girl from North Carolina, and my dream job growing up was to become a journalist, but specifically a travel or entertainment journalist. I was lucky enough to land my dream job. I was a correspondent and fill-in anchor for E! News for about 7 years. And when I met Philippe one evening, he was giving a speech about the BP oil spill. And I remember I looked at him and I thought to myself, wow, why am I talking about like Kylie Jenner's new haircut when I could be talking about this person who is like the true life Indiana Jones? I need to reevaluate my life goals. And I did. And Philippe and I have been together ever since.
Literally since that night.
Since that night.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, for me, it was all about, okay, we need more people to care about the ocean. And to do that, we need more people to know about the ocean. And so I always, still to this day, I always look of, you know, how can we just expand the people that know about these issues, the people that understand how complex our ocean is, and how we can't talk about climate change or weather without talking about our ocean, but yet we still go to all these climate change conferences and no one's talking about the ocean. So Philippe and I now, you know, we work together. We do everything from, you know, we wrote Oceans for Dummies.
Well, you wrote most of it.
Okay, that's true. So we do that. We have shows on Travel Channel, you know, on Discovery Channel. And I really look at, like Philippe said, you know, as storytellers, just how can we tell the story of the ocean better? How can we make it more exciting? How can we get people more involved? And how can we also show the human connection to our ocean? Because we all know there are some people, but there's not enough people that care about polar bears. Like, we have to stop talking about polar bears, and we need to start talking about the whole systems and how that affects putting food on the table for your family, or how that affects your children having asthma, or how that affects national security. And so we're really thinking about, you know, connecting the dots for people between their daily lives and the ocean.
So since we're here today to talk about krill, and specifically Antarctic krill, do you want to talk about how you got involved in specifically the southern Antarctic Ocean, and even more specifically the Antarctic krill?
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say that my family's been involved in this work for a long time. My grandfather was one of the key individuals that really helped the Madrid Protocol that protected the continent of Antarctica get ratified by the United States and France, particularly his work with George H.W. Bush in getting the United States on board. But our personal connection to Antarctica, actually, Ashlan's predates mine.
So yes, I made it to all 7 continents before my husband.
Wow.
Which I think
That's
is a
impressive.
pretty awesome thing, considering I'm married to a Cousteau. So I was like, that's pretty cool. So yes, I went down to Antarctica in 2017, I think was my first trip, and really just fell in love with the continent and the science that was going on, and the issues that are around, you know, that are on the continent and obviously surrounding in the Southern Ocean. Then, you know, Philippe and I were invited to be on well, it's not a board, but to be a part of the group of Antarctica 2020. And we are tasked as a group to establish 3 new marine protected areas around Antarctica in the Southern Ocean. When we get these 3 marine protected areas established, it will be not only 1% of our ocean, which is incredible, but it would also be the largest act of conservation in the history of humankind. Wow. And that's what really gets us excited. And, why we are specifically so driven to get these marine protected areas established is, number one, we know they work. We've seen them work in Cabo Pulmo, in Bikini Atoll, in the Mediterranean. We know marine protected areas work. And we also know that the Southern Ocean is our most fertile and most vital part of our ocean. We always like to remind people that there's only one ocean, just different areas have different names. Yes. So the whole thing is connected. So even if people think that the Southern Ocean is so far away from them, it's not. It affects our climate. It affects our weather. It affects our food system. And specifically krill, they are the keystone species, meaning almost every single animal in Antarctica either eats krill or eats something that eats krill. So it's a keystone species in the Southern Ocean. But it is technically a keystone species for our entire ocean because it's the fertile, cold waters of Antarctica moving up to the warmer waters around the equator that warm, then they go up to the Arctic, they get cold, they come back down again. But it's the nutrients that are in the Southern Ocean that actually disperse across our entire ocean and are the basis of our entire ocean food web. So krill are very, 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 very important, if I cannot express that enough.
I know this tiny little crustacean, right? And when you think about the system that they're involved in, of also the phytoplankton providing most of the oxygen on Earth, of course, this carbon sink that they're instrumental to, which is the largest single carbon sink on Earth, 12 or so billion tons that is absorbed through that phytoplankton whale krill system. Kind of important.
Just kind of.
We've been engaged with Antarctica 2020 for about 3 years now, and really honored to be a part of that group of really extraordinary people. Yeah.
Well, and it's a good thing that krill are finally getting their awareness data since they're so important.
Krill. I mean, they're these little superheroes that
I know.
nobody knows about. They're awesome.
Right. So we do know, though, that climate change and industrial fishing are impacting krill. Can you talk a little bit more about what needs to be done to protect them and what specifically you two are doing to sort of change the narrative around one of the biggest impacts of that fishing industry around krill?
Yeah, so, I mean, krill, these mighty superheroes, are facing mighty challenges. Number one, ocean, the poor things, not even just 2 issues. There's ocean acidification, there's ocean warming, there's the ice melting, which is changing the salinity of the Southern Ocean. I mean, it's a whole bag of not great news. But for us specifically, there's something that humans are doing that's just dumb. And we should stop doing dumb
There are
things.
many things.
Well, there's many things humans are doing dumb.
This one in particular is
Some
really
easier
dumb.
to stop.
This is really dumb. So let's talk specifically about the industrial krill fishery. So these boats are going down and scooping up krill as much as they possibly can, especially where they're super concentrated, where whales and penguins and seals are all trying to feed. It's a mess. But what really drives us crazy is 70% of the market value of krill is specifically for the nutraceutical market of North America, which means that most of the krill being fished is coming to the United States to be sold as omega-3 supplements. Now,
crazy.
Omega-3s are great. They're good for you. Amazing. Here's the kicker. Krill and fish, they don't make their own omega-3s. They get omega-3s by eating algae. So we are literally disrupting our largest carbon sink, one of our largest suppliers of oxygen, the basis of our entire ocean food web, for something that is completely replaceable. And not even just replaceable, there's a better alternative. If you go straight to the algae, you're going straight to the source. If you're going and fishing krill for their omega-3s, you're just going to the middleman. So as humans, we can just stop most of this industry by just getting consumers to understand that if you do indeed take fish oil or krill oil, please know that there isn't just a replacement, there's a better alternative.
Yeah, it's wild. It's a great example of really a manufactured demand for a subpar product by a special interest. And that industry, predominantly driven by Norway. Norway is the largest krill fisher on Earth, followed by China. And the obstruction of the establishment of these critical MPAs, because you mentioned, Lindsay, that climate change is affecting krill. Well, it's estimated that krill populations could drop by 30% over the next few decades, right? And just from climate, from ocean warming and the melting sea ice and the salinity changes, et cetera, that Ashlan mentioned. So we should not be compounding the pressures on this critical system by catching it in order to enrich a few folks in an industry for absolutely no reason at all. Algae-based omega-3s are more absorbable simply because they're a more water-soluble lipid. They're just a fat that your body absorbs better. It's just chemistry. It's not like anything more complicated than that. And so we can now grow that algae in farms on non-arable land. In other words, land that can't be farmed on land, providing good. I mean, these algae farms that we're actually working on this project, on this work. These algae farms are here in the United States, providing good, U.S. jobs. And the only inputs to those algae farms is sunlight and some CO2 purchased from local power plants. And then you extract the omega-3s from this algae, and you get a more absorbable, better quality, clean, vegan, plant-based product. And so there's by no measure is krill or frankly fish oil from omegas a better, superior product to algae. Then you add on the fact that, and we're also working to preserve the world's largest carbon sink critical to ocean biodiversity and oxygen production. And you start to think, maybe a better product for me and for the ocean, that's a good play. So we're actually, for Krill Day, our big news, which you're the first to hear about it actually, we are launching pre-orders for our algae-based omega-3 supplement that also has astaxanthin, which is a antioxidant, which is also found in krill. And one of the reason people take krill oil is for the astaxanthin. So we've combined that
it's
from
just
algae.
another algae that
of course. They're not inventing it.
Straight to the source, everybody.
So we're launching Cvrkel, and our pre-orders are going live for World
fantastic.
Krill Day. So we're pretty excited.
Congratulations. That's very exciting.
The best thing for krill is to keep krill in the ocean.
Absolutely.
And-
That's it.
And people need omegas. They're a great product. So let's get them from the source. Let's get them from algae. So that's what we're doing.
Be more like krill rather than eat krill.
There you go.
Exactly.
They know what's up. They're eating They're eating algae.
Yeah.
They don't need each other to get omegas. Why are we?
Yep.
So yeah.
Amazing. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners about what they could be doing to protect krill from where they live?
Yeah, I mean, here in North America, really the biggest one, again, the biggest demand for krill is for omegas, for nutraceuticals. And krill meal is also used in aquaculture, but it is a lower value product, right? You usually squeeze and extract the oil and then take that krill meal and sell it on to aquaculture feed for salmon and things like that. So there is zero reason for the krill omega market to exist. There's a lot of greenwashing going on and obfuscation and frankly downright lies in the market about krill oil. But the science and the data is that it's destroying the Southern Ocean, and it's unnecessary, and it's inferior to algae-based omegas. That's just the facts. So really a simple daily thing, if you or someone you know takes omega-3s, get vegan omega-3s and sign up, and listen, Cvrkel is launching World Krill Day, but no matter what you do, look for krill alternatives, preferably plant-based products, predominantly nutraceuticals. And honestly, that's the main use of krill. It's not like palm oil. We talk about palm oil and it's used in a million different things. Krill oil is in nutraceuticals in North America. That's the main market. So we as consumers have actually an enormous amount of power and a better alternative to shift that demand, reduce the economic incentive for fishing in the Southern Ocean, and then reduce the incentive for these companies in these countries to obstruct what is and will be the single largest act of ocean conservation in human history.
Yes, I like that. It's a clear clear one good step that people can take
Yeah.
instead of having to
Which is
have all the different suggestions coming at them from everywhere.
Yeah, like,
so
your
rare.
carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot. Like, carbon
Yeah, what
footprint,
we
yes.
eat
Carbon
and,
footprint, yes. But it's like,
plastic,
yeah.
this is
Yeah.
one thing you can do every day to save the krill.
This is a win we can all come together around and achievable.
Amazing.
And again, even if you don't give a hoot about Antarctica, it also just happens that algae is a better product, it's more absorbable. So why would you want to take
doesn't
it anyway?
taste fishy.
Right?
But
People
please,
don't know.
everybody should give a hoot
Yes,
about
they
Antarctica.
But
Yeah,
We agree.
if you like to breathe,
Yes.
you
should
know,
care about
Breathe and eat. You like Antarctica.
Yeah, you know, Antarctica matters. So.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Philippe, especially, you talked a lot about continuing your family's marine conservation legacy, and we just wanted to ask, like, why was that so important to you? I mean, obviously, your family's legacy is important to all of us. I think the three of us grew up, like, with amazing ocean documentaries and going to the ocean and being inspired by what we saw on TV. But do you want to talk about, like, why it was so important to you personally?
So I never actually got to meet my father, Philippe Sr. He died in an airplane accident just 6 months before I was born. But so my mother raised by a single mom, my sister and I. And she had such a big influence on us growing up and really helping us understand how important purpose is in life, more than anything else. And, you know, frankly, that's something I think the world is struggling with right now, particularly coming out of COVID, right? The difference between value and purpose in life and making money or having lots of stuff, et cetera, which, you know, doesn't fulfill. And my mom is really wonderful and is wonderful, and a hero of mine who helped us recognize that purpose is really important, however we decided to pursue that purpose. It just so happens that when I was 16, I had an opportunity to go to Papua New Guinea with Dr. Eugenie Clark, who was a pioneering female oceanographer. And I remember we were out about 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks in southeastern New Guinea. And we were diving every day. We were out in amidst people that had never been contacted or seen, you know, in out islands, these tribes that were completely unknown really to the West very much, very little contact. We were trading, you know, with them and you know, rice and things like that for fresh fruit. And then on our days off, we'd go hiking in the mountains surrounding this one bay that we were in, days away from anything. And we saw a huge cave and went into this cave, and it was filled with human skulls going back centuries.
Did not see that coming.
With nobody knew why. Nobody knows to this day what they are, the culture or the religion or the spiritual that it stems from. It's lost to history. So here I am, 16 years old, in the middle of the jungle in skull caves, diving and with saltwater crocodiles, all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, this is Indiana Jones.
Right,
This
yeah.
is so cool. And I was like, of course I want to do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So it just so happens, you know, and I did know my grandfather well as well. And so that idea of purpose and the importance of purpose and working to make the world better was always ingrained in me. And then being able to have those experiences, you know, when I was younger, really cemented that this was the route. Exploration, adventure, and conservation and restoration was the route that I wanted to take.
Yeah. That's a really good answer with some surprising twists in it. Okay, so one question we do like to ask everybody on this World Krill Day podcast is, what is your favorite fun fact about krill?
Ooh.
So I just looked it up yesterday, I think it was.
Yeah.
Their krill are about the size of your thumb in length, right, up to 2 inches. And they weigh 0.035 ounces. They weigh virtually nothing. And yet, this tiny, tiny little virtually weightless thing is absolutely critical to life on Earth.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
That is amazing.
Very good fact.
And I think that it's back when we were whaling, when
that's a good one.
You know, the countries were whaling. We've gone back and I looked at this through sediment testing. But so whales eat krill, right?
Yeah.
Whales eat krill. And
It's whale poop.
so, well, hold on.
Okay,
So
it's always got to come back to poop.
Yeah.
You probably
Oh
weren't
no,
expecting
we
us to
always
say
know it
that.
comes back
I'm just
to poop.
Poop is great. So I think what's so cool is when humans were hunting whales and the whale population declined, one would think that the krill population would explode, right? Because one of their main predators, I mean, they have lots of predators, but as you can imagine, whales eat a lot of krill because they're really big. So as we humans, again, we were being dumb and we were hunting whales, as the whale populations declined, one would think that the krill populations would explode, but they didn't. They also decreased. And scientists were a little perplexed about this, and what they were realizing was that in this cycle of phytoplankton, krill, and whales, that when the whale population decreased, so did the phytoplankton, because whale poop is rich in iron. And the phytoplankton needs iron. So when the whales died and the iron-rich poop stopped, then the phytoplankton blooms were smaller, and then the krill didn't have enough to eat, so their population declined as well. So I always thought that was so interesting that when you do take out a big apex predator, that still, it just goes to show that then the entire ecosystem that they eat, that's below them, quote unquote, also suffers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I always thought that was fun, that krill, and again, krill is this incredible ecosystem that's so important to oxygen, to carbon sequestration, and when we disrupt it, it's not good.
When everybody thinks that like the disruption of the global carbon cycle happened during the Industrial Revolution, it actually predates that by a couple hundred years, when humans were killing the whales at millions of them, and we were destroying this whole massive system. That's when we actually started disrupting the global climate and carbon cycle, the 1600s. And so
because then we were also burning the whale blubber
and all that
releasing
stuff.
it in the light, and like, oh my god.
Yeah, what were we using it for?
Fire.
Yep. Literally burning all of the whales up. So, the system is one that is so important, what's left of it. And to think that we're disrupting that predominantly for supplements.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fish food and pet food is really is really crazy.
Yeah, absolutely absurd. Okay, so we are a whale-based podcast, and we're so excited to be talking about krill, but we always want to bring it back to our favorites. And so we were hoping maybe you could share one of your favorite or most exciting whale encounters that you've had in your travels with our audience.
Ooh, whale encounters. Well, you should tell your sperm whale story.
Oh, yes, please.
That was a cool one. We were filming a show. I was a co-host for a show called Oceans on BBC about 10 years ago, a little more now. And we were filming in the Sea of Cortez. And there was a pod of about 4 or 5, I think it was 5 juvenile sperm whales that were all, we think they were all males. They were all kind of roughhousing, essentially, in the water. And so, sperm whales, pretty big. And so we entered the water. We were snorkeling with the cameraman and myself, and we felt like we were a safe distance away where you could still see the whales, but we were far enough away. Well, we weren't, because even though we were probably like 50 feet away from the nearest whale, all of a sudden, one of the whales literally came up over and rolled over the back of the whale that was in the foreground that we were filming, and its pectoral fin, the tip of it came over and smacked me. Not its pectoral fin. I'm sorry. It's dorsal fin. Tail fin. I'm sorry. It's tail fluke. Came over and hit me, and knocked the wind out of me, knocked my mask and snorkel off, and like stunned me, hit me into the cameraman, who dropped the camera. He had it on a tether, thank goodness, and stunned him, and like in an instant. Obviously not the whale's fault. They didn't even probably really care or know we were there. A little gnat flying around. But it was just a very intimate moment with a sperm whale.
Indeed.
That definitely, again, we thought we had plenty of distance between us and the whale, but I guess when one school bus rolls over another school bus and whacks into you, you kind of realize that that 50 feet maybe isn't even enough. But that was pretty, and in hindsight, very cool.
Yeah.
Nobody ultimately got really hurt.
Terrifying.
So, very cool. Terrifying at the moment, yeah.
And I was running through my list of whale stories, and I have not been slapped by one, but there is one that I love. We were up near you all. We were up off of San Juan Island, and we were looking for Granny. You know, one of the most famous orcas, and it was the first year that they had not seen her. And we were just filming the J-Pod out there. We were out with Ken Balcom and his team of whale researchers, which are just incredible humans. And I remember we were just there. We found a few of the, part of the pod, and all of a sudden, we looked, and there was a salmon, a huge Chinook salmon, that decided to take refuge underneath the little boat we were in. Then the next thing we know, 6 of J-Pod were coming over and trying to move our boat out of the way to get the salmon. And I was so excited. I literally was screaming like a child, but trying to be quiet, like when you're so excited but your parents are telling you not to make any noise. So I'm there like hyperventilating. I have tears coming down my face. I have snot coming out of my nose because I am like, oh my God, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. So in the end, I think somehow the salmon got away. I still don't know. Somehow the salmon got away, but since the orcas were there, and since the orcas know Ken, they just kind of cruised. They were spy hopping, kind of looking at us. Like, I swear to God, one of them waved at us. But it was really amazing to just be there with that family. Yeah. And that was really, really cool. And then at one point, one of the big boys from J or L, I think it was one of the guys from L Pod, we were looking at Mount Rainier in the background, and he just full body jumped out of the water.
I think it was Mount Baker.
Was it Mount Baker? Yeah. And we have a picture of it was Baker. So we just have a picture of this full breach. It was like he knew what he was doing.
Yeah,
he was like, hey guys, watch this.
Right out of special casting. It was like, go.
It was incredible.
It was fantastic.
So I mean, we have awesome stories. But I think orcas are one of my favorite.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, being where we are, orcas are, up there for us.
Yeah. Close to home.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
So is there anything else that we missed that you'd like to touch on about krill, whales, anything?
Thank you for doing the story.
Well, actually, I will say the one thing I don't think we said, the one thing I didn't think we said, and not to sound too like pitchy, but literally the only reason we're doing this business is to save krill and is to save the Southern Ocean. So our pre-launch is open today, and anybody that's interested can go to Cvrkel.com, and that's SEAVOIR, Cvrkel.com, and sign up.
Great. Yeah, we'll put that link in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I can't believe that happened.
Right? Me either.
And truly, we have to thank each and every one of the guests who took the time to speak to us from truly all over the world. So to Kim, Jen, Nikki, Philippe, and Ashlan, thank you so much for joining us and for spreading the important word about krill and what people like us can do to try and support and save and protect and care about this incredibly important species, not just for whales, but really for all of us.
Yeah, I think when we started this journey, I was like, yeah, krill, that's cool, let's do it. And now I'm like, yes, krill, let's do it.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed. Save the krill, save the world.
Yeah. And that brings us to the end of this extra special episode. Thank you to everyone, new and old listeners alike, for joining us here to celebrate World Krill Day.
We will be back at the end of the month with our regularly scheduled episode. And if you just can't get enough of us, be sure to check out our Patreon, where we will have even more new content coming to you this month.
We would love to hear your thoughts on this episode or any episode. So please visit our website, whale-tales.org, and find links to our various social media handles so that you can drop us a line.
You can also head to our website to subscribe to the podcast and catch up on our almost 60 other episodes. And of course, while you're there, read almost 1,300 whale, dolphin, and porpoise stories from around the world.
As we have already mentioned, we do have a Patreon. You can head to patreon.com/whaletales to find out how you can support everything we do here and get some amazing perks along the way.
That's whale-tales.org. Tales like the story, not tales like the animal.
And if you've seen a cetacean in the wild, we would love to add your story to our library. You can click the share link on our website. You can contact us on social media at whaletales_org, or you can email us a voice memo and tell us all about your incredible cetacean encounter.
Thank you everyone so much, including again our special guests and the Pew Charitable Trusts, and especially Barbara, who coordinated the interviews with all of our special guests. Barbara, you made our dreams come true. Thank you so much for this. And we hope that you all have a Krilly great day.